And you are on, sir.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the regular Finance Committee meeting of June 21st, 2021 at approximately 5:01 p.m. Can I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Counselor Cassett,
Here.
Counselor Villarreal,
Present.
Counselor Lindell,
I'm here.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Here.
and Counselor Beta.
Here. Okay, we have our next item is approval of the agenda. Are there changes from staff?
No changes at this time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, changes from the committee. Can I have a motion regarding the agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Beta.
Yes. Okay, we have approval of the consent agenda, items to be removed from the consent agenda. Councilwoman Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. Item E, item H, item I, and item L.
Okay, Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also have questions on item I and item Z, as in zebra.
I and Z. Okay,
Mr. Chair,
yes, Councilwoman Romero.
I'd also like to pull E.
E, okay.
Yep.
E, okay. And Councilwoman Cassette.
I had E and I also on my list.
Okay, and then I'll withdraw item B just so I could recuse myself for that because it's pertains to the Boys and Girls Club. So then what I've got is the consent agenda. The items that have been pulled are item B, E, H, I, L, and Z. Is that right? Have I missed any? Okay, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
Move to approve as amended.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal, Counselor Villarreal,
Sorry, my mute. Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Beta.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so that approves the consent agenda. Next is approval of minutes, the regular Finance Committee meeting minutes of May 17th, 2021. Are there any changes from staff?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any changes from the committee? Is there a motion regarding the minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
and Counselor Beta.
Yes. Okay, so that brings us to item 6, presentation. 6A, a bond presentation with our municipal advisor, bond counsel, and staff. 1, refunding of the 2010B and 2012A bonds. 2, GRT bond issuance in FY22. 3, GO bond calendar, A, capacity, and 4, GO bond impact on property tax rates. Staff.
Good evening, Chairman, councilors. I'll be leading this here. And so the first item is the refunding of the 2010B and the 2012A bonds. The 2010B is the Railyard infrastructure bond. and the 2012A is a CIP bond. I've included a bunch of documentation in the packet for you. We have a calendar. We've already written the bond ordinance. We've already written the POS. And we also have Peter Franklin, our bond counsel, with us, if you have any questions about those. We have a draft RFQ for the underwriter. We have and what I'm sharing with you is the savings proposal from our municipal advisor. And by refunding these two bonds, the city will save roughly $1,347,000, net present value of $1.296 million. So we have a net present value, a savings of 8.79%. Our policy, the debt policy, says if it's over, and it's either 3 or 5%, that it's a transaction we should participate in. Also on this point, I've had a number of investors contact the city and say, are you guys going to refund these bonds? And so the market expects the city, when it can save money like this, that it actually do this. Mr. Chair, if there's any questions.
Questions from the committee?
Mr. Chair,
Councilor Villarreal, yes.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, first, Brad, can you increase the view of the document? Yeah, thank you. And then just so folks know about what it means to refund, can you just give us a little background on what that actually means?
It means exactly refinance. It's just like refinancing your house. What we're doing is we will go out to the market, borrow, $1,475,745,000, and pay off the old bonds, and then pay a lower mortgage payment for the remainder of our term.
Got it. Thank
So-
you. That's helpful. And can you remind us what the Railyard infrastructure bond was for specifically?
Specifically, probably not. We'd need to get Sam or someone from the past. But the infrastructure bond, it was not the garage. I don't believe it was the garage. I think it was like putting in and I could be wrong, but parking lots, improving the roads, sidewalks, water, sewer, electric, basic things.
Okay, so it's basic infrastructure for the Railyard district.
It is one of the two bonds that that's specifically identified in the Railyard, Santa Fe Railyard Community Court master agreement, that their payment is to pay us to pay that bond. So it's really tied to the rent paid by the lessees through the Santa Fe Railyard Community Court.
Okay, thanks for that clarity.
Okay, any other questions regarding this specific topic?
Yeah,
Mr. Chair, yeah, go ahead.
Councilwoman Lindell.
thank you. Thank you, Councilor Romero-Worth. Brad, is this a review of all the long-term bonds that we have?
The municipal advisor and bond counsel and staff, Mary McCoy, the finance director, myself, Alexis, we meet regularly, once or twice a year to review what our options are with the debt portfolio. And so this is an ongoing monitoring program. We'll be back in about a year and a half to do the 13 and 14 bonds. It's as long as interest rates are this low, you can expect us about every there's a call feature on all municipal bonds unless there's something else at 10 years. And it gives the municipalities the right to refinance their debt. And so when our bonds hit that 10-year mark, really about 9 years, we're looking at them and saying, is this something we want to refund?
Great. I just wanted to, and I figured that you were, but I just wanted to make sure that we were looking at the entire portfolio as it became available for refinancing, because it seems like we have the ability to have significant savings, however you want to look at it, or, much less debt, really. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So who's impacted by the refunding of this in terms of, so you mentioned that this might affect the rent paid by the leases at the Railyard, and it affects what the Railyard Corp pays to us. Is that the sum of it?
Through the chair, Counselor, it doesn't really affect them. The master lease has already spelled out the payments. And so we could go to, I'm sure the city attorney's office, we could go do an amendment 11 or 12 now. But, this is going to be, I don't know the proration, the allocation between the two, but I think it's 50-50. So it would be about 150,000 a year that, if the city chose to reduce the Railyard Community Corp's payments on their thing, they could do that, but it would require a renegotiation of the master lease. My guess is when we paid off the 2 tiny NMFA bonds in 2018, that was not a cause to renegotiate the master lease. The city, they kept paying it. It's part of the master lease, but the notes were paid off in 2018. The other half is actually the general fund, and the Fund 365, our capital account, would save the money because that's a GRT CIP fund bond. So that would reduce, that would go directly to Fund 365.
Okay, so 365 is a line item, correct?
It's the
Or a
capital
fund.
allocation of GRT.
Okay. Yeah, that's Russian to me. I know it means something to you, but unless you give me a chart that spells out what 365 is, means nothing. Okay, I just trying to figure out, obviously seems like this is the right thing to be doing. I'm just curious what ripple effect, what impact it has as we do this. So that it would be, I think, helpful. I don't know if there are other people involved who know more of the details and could give us some indication of that. I think it would be helpful just to understand the ripple effects.
The ripple, Mr. Chair, the ripple effects are the city saves money. The city, it'll be available to the city council to allocate how it wants. The Fund 365 is the primary account we pay all gross receipts tax debt out of for all CIP. It's where funds are spent for buying capital equipment and projects for public works and other departments. That's Fund 365.
Okay.
But it's capital expenditures.
Yeah, and I understand that the city saves money, but because this involves the Railyard, it gets complicated quickly. And I just curious what else, in doing how that, affects the balance between the Railyard Corp and us and payments that are due to us and all that kind of thing.
From the city's books, it just simply reduces the amount the general fund would have to subsidize the rail yard fund.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and Brad, how much money is in account 365 now? Do you know? Do you have that?
Andy's, I believe, Alexis may have that open. I'll have to open an email, Chair, but it'll take me a second. And this is, we had asked Andy Hopkins, our acting budget officer, to produce a projected cash report just the other day. And so the projected ending balance for Fund 365 would be 6.8 million. Mr. Chair, if I may, though, that includes my revision for the GRT for the year,
Okay.
which is probably to do with my GRT memo.
Okay. And so in order to proceed with refunding the bonds, is it a resolution that one of the members of the governing body needs to sponsor to get going?
Yes, at some point in time, I will be coming to the governing body. I do have a calendar also for this.
Okay.
Hang on, let me share my screen. And these, I believe, are all in your packet as well. And so in this case, we're right here. We've already are going to be circulating the RFQ for the underwriter. This is, again, this is at some point in time, it'll be introduced at the governing body meeting on the 30th. And then it would be taken up by first reading by the Planning Commission and then the Finance Committee. So on the 26th, Public Works Committee, Finance Committee on July 19th. It'll be coming to you.
Okay. So are there any objections to this calendar from the committee or any concerns about moving forward as proposed by staff? Okay, I don't hear any. So Brad, if you can continue on the path you are with refunding these bonds, that would be great.
Mr. Chair, I will, thank you. And I'll say Peter Franklin, our bond counsel, is a great help on these. Mr. Chair, the next item is sort of the GRT bond question. And what I have here is the calendar for that. And again, without the revision to GRT, given that we have 10 months, we received the 10th month of GRT in the bank last week. And given where we are budget-wise for FY21, we didn't expect to end the year at 6 million. Almost 7 million in the capital fund. But, like 30 days ago, we told Public Works Director, Ms. Wheeler, that she would have no capital unless we issued a GRT bond. for FY22 or FY23. And so that's really what the discussion was about that. This is something, again, it's entirely within the city council's governing body's control. It does not require a public vote. We're here to discuss the calendar, the timing of it, what the finance committee would like to see as information as to what projects, timing of projects that would like to be done. So, Mr. Chair, this is really an opportunity for the finance committee to give staff direction on if it wants to go this direction, and if so, how would it like to proceed? And here's a calendar that we suggest.
Okay, how much money would it generate?
It would be well within the city's about the 20 million easily. We could easily issue up to 30 million.
And so it would, so we could issue that and it would generate $20 million that we could put into CIP projects.
That would need to be spent over the next 3 years.
And kind of getting to the earlier question that Councilor Romero Worth asked, how does this affect the taxpayer or the public if we issue something like this? How does it impact them? Who are the players? What's, you know?
With a GRT, because the city assesses 8.4375% on all eligible transactions within the city, it has no effect on that. What it does do is we have, so let's say GRT is 100 million. Mm-hmm. And pledged revenues is roughly 60 million. And our debt service has to be half of the 60 million or less. Right now, the city's debt service is roughly 25 million, on its way to 17 million in 2024. And we would have a borrowing capacity of incurring an additional mortgage payment, go back to the mortgage, of roughly $10 to $12 million a year in 2024. And so what we're saying is right now we have about 8 million, 7 million available in our budget for mortgage payments if the city council chooses to take a mortgage out on what we're not borrowing against our house, we're borrowing against future GRT receipts.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilor Romero Worth.
And you said, I mean, I've been hearing 20 million is the number we're looking at. You suggested 30 billion. From the finance side of things, I mean, is it more risky to take 30 at this point?
When I'm looking at pledged revenues and the strength that GRT has been through this pandemic, you know, the massive decline in debt service coming in the next couple years. Yeah, and again, when you're talking about mortgage, you know, it's like a $400,000 house. My mortgage is going to be, you know, so much a month. In this case, you know, you're talking, you know, a $10 million. How much of our pledged revenues is that? And I don't have that calculation in front of me, but not immaterial, but not significant either.
And
I wouldn't mind borrowing at a lower rate. I mean, if you've watched the news, the finance news, interest rates are going up. CPI last year over year, the consumer price index went up 5.5% in May. The producer price index went up 6.6% in May, year over year. And so, I mean, that's what they're measuring now. And so, and they're saying it's transient, but it's going to persist for a while, you know, through the year, through the end of next year. The supply chain needs to get fixed. So, I mean, I don't know how long this inflation is going to last, but interest rates are going higher. The Fed said so. They met last week. So why not take advantage of it now?
Yeah, so I think, Mr. Chair, that, and I think this is for the committee, not for our staff, but, I think some of the other constraints are that these have to be, I think Brad said, spent in 3 years, our capacity to spend the money. We need, I think, some recommendations from staff about, what of all, I mean, I know we have millions of dollars worth of deferred maintenance in the city. What are the things that are the most urgent that we have the capacity to get done in the period of time that this money has to be spent? So we don't, I guess my point is we don't want to bite off more than we can chew. And I mean, I think we need to do this and we need to do it regularly like we're starting to do. But I think there's some other parameters that we have to think about. And I do think we need Regina and company to give us a list and then we react to that in terms of the overall projects. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilwoman Cassette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I do want to echo some of what Councilor Romero Worth was saying about some of the proposals that, oh, hi, Regina, she's here. And I've actually recently been speaking with Regina and her team a lot about paving. I've had a number of streets in my district that there's been a lot of conversation about deferred maintenance, especially on residential streets. And this has been something that I had the opportunity to speak with Regina and Mark and Tomas about some of the needs in our community and how much paving needs to be done. And it's really, it's quite astonishing. And so that is what I would like to hear from Regina about how this money would be spent. And I know, Regina, we had spoken a little bit about some of the staffing challenges that if we get this money and how we spend those dollars and how that impacts our ability to get the work done in the amount of time. And so that's something that I'd really like to see a very detailed outline about as we continue to consider this. But I agree with Councilor Romero Worth that we need to be doing this. We need to be doing it regularly. Regina and I had a really interesting conversation about some of the preventative measures that we could and don't take when it comes to street paving and ways that we can make our pavement last longer so that we're not running into these issues. And so those are some things that I'd really like to consider with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. So Brad, when we're talking about our rates, the rates are really good right now. It does appear like rates will be going up, but the other thing that I read today was that we're at 5% inflation. So how do we thread the needle between balancing inflation and rates? I mean, it seems like we want to borrow money, certainly, while the rates are low, but if we can't implement that money and do projects at a pretty much a breakneck speed, it looks like inflation is going to take a sizable bite into some of this money. Do you have a thought on that?
If we were to say take the 30 million issue, and it took us, we did it right. We spent 10 million a year. So the first year we would lose $500,000 worth of purchasing power. The second year we would lose $1 million of purchasing power. And the third year, we would lose $1.5 million of purchasing power. And so total, we would lose over the 3 years, $3 million in purchasing power.
That's a lot.
Yes, and it's real. And again, so it's an interesting problem. Not only is the city finance department going to struggle with, Mr. Chair, but the Federal Reserve is struggling with this same question. How do we have such high inflation and such low interest rates? And if the inflation does not persist, eventually our purchasing power will erode at a lower rate. But interest rates have to go up to offset that erosion. So right now we're sort of in a window of time that nobody really knows what's going to happen, how fast the underlying causes of inflation, whether it be printing of money, just massive borrowing by the federal or the Treasury for stimulus and infrastructure projects. It's a guess. Just really have no idea. But low rates will last for 20 years.
Okay. The other thing is, I think that as a council, we're going to need to review and have a very serious discussion about our staffing and project management, engineers. I mean, Ms. Wheeler, how many times have we put out for an engineer and not been able to hire?
Chairman, Councilor Lindell, thank you for that question. Like 7 times. Like John Romero advertised his traffic engineer position for 3 solid years since I got here and never got a qualified applicant, and we just did it again and did not get a qualified applicant. So we're making some adjustments to that. That's the answer. Thank you.
Well, as a council, we can't go on this way. I mean, it doesn't make any sense for us to not have a traffic engineer and project managers. We advertise for these positions and we are not getting applicants. And I'm assuming the reason is that we're not paying enough. And I mean, we can continue to advertise. That doesn't cost us anything. But what does cost us is that we're not able to do these projects that we need to be doing. And additionally, with what Brad is saying, it's not just costing us continued deterioration and frustration. This is going to start to cut in and be costing us real dollars. And I think that we need to address this sooner rather than later. I don't want to wait another 3 to 5 years to be able to hire a traffic engineer. That doesn't make any sense. We will have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars because we didn't. So, Chair, I think that that's a discussion that we're going to have. It's otherwise we just aren't getting the traction that we need to have. We're asking people to do way more with way less, and we need these positions. And for years, we've seen project managers that'll be here for 6 months and then they're gone. And we got to have them. I mean, if we want to implement these kinds of projects, $20 million worth of projects, plus the money that we've already got sitting, we're going to have people that can oversee those projects. And I think Brad made it pretty clear that if we borrow those funds, we're fighting inflation. If we don't implement and complete those projects, we will start to lose real dollars. So that's what I think about this, Chair. We're going to have that discussion.
Thank you, Counselor. Ms. Wheeler.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to respond a little bit, counselors, so that you're aware. Project administrators have not been as hard to get as professional engineers like the traffic engineer. They don't need to be PEs. And we are actually in the process of hiring 2 new people right now, one great one from outside the city and one great one from inside the city. It's true, we have had significant turnover in this area because they are a really valuable skill set. The county just stole like 3 project administrators, boom, boom, boom from us. But they're not impossible to recruit. And I did just successfully work with Bernadette Salazar, HR director, to create a career ladder so that our highly skilled and highly certified project administrators now can be reclassified into a higher level with higher pay for retention, as well as value. And so I think, you're exactly right. We do need to definitely look at our capacity. And I am optimistic that we'll have strong project administrator capacity. Another point that I wanted to make was in looking at this GRT bond for all the reasons that all the counselors have mentioned, I'll be recommending a significant portion, half or more, go to paving. Because there aren't huge inflation costs there. It doesn't have steel, it doesn't have microchips, it doesn't have all those things that are driving costs up. And so Mark Brooks can deploy $5 million a year, boom, so we can get it spent fast. It doesn't take a lot of project administration. We get real value for the money. We can start doing some of the residential roads that have 4-inch wide cracks in them and weeds growing out. We can do some of the maintenance work that we discussed, like fog and crack sealing, to really help extend the life of the pavement. So, I'd probably be recommending around $12.5 million go to paving, and that'll give us a chance to really catch up on some roads, as well as deploy the money quickly. And I think those were, but we also, and just to remind the governing body, or the finance committee, we did get additional project management capacity added to our FY22 budget. That's going to put a project administrator in parks. It's going to put a project administrator in transit. It adds to our capital project planning capacity and reporting. So we'll be getting those positions in a week or so with FY22 budget coming into place, and we're making plans and already moving ahead with recruitment and planning for those positions. So it's definitely a good conversation to have, a good important thing to keep our eye on, and we're already starting to work on it, both in our design of the GRT bond as well as in the staffing. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Councilwoman Cassette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Wheeler, for highlighting some of those. I am curious if you mentioned career ladders is one way that we can improve on retention of these project administrators. What else do we need to be keeping our eye on? Because the fact that, how many did you say? 3 just left us for the county? That's very concerning to me. And I know that it's not just happening in your department. So, but I am curious if, from what you're seeing, what else do we need to be keeping our eye on to retain our staff who come in and they have experience, they have knowledge, they, understand what's happening at the city, and then we lose them. And then we have to start all over as we hire people, and they're wonderful people, but of course you have to onboard, and that takes time. And to Councilor Lindell's point, time is money, and it hurts us. So I'm really curious about what are the things that we need to be keeping our eyes on, and some of those decision points that we need to be considering as we look at retaining our staff.
Thank you, Chairman and Councilor Cassett, for that question. This answer might be surprising to you, but I think the second place to look besides the career ladder is in our internal processes. What makes these projects take a long time to deploy is not the project managers. It's the incredibly cumbersome and unclear internal processes. Things just get hung up for months on end. So, on the upside, that's one of the reasons our project administrators can handle $15 million of projects, because millions of dollars of projects are just sitting on desks around the city waiting for whatever they're waiting for. And so we could go faster and we could make the people more satisfied. It's very frustrating for a project administrator to just constantly be trying to jump over the newest hurdle, which, you know, happens to them over and over and over and over. And it gets really frustrating, as, you know, Sam Burnett likes to call it, it's education by rejection. We don't have our processes documented. They're completely inconsistent. They take a long, long time, and it's demoralizing. And we lose our better people to that, I would say. And I think we're beginning to take a look at that as a team. I think we're going to be really taking this opportunity of the Munis upgrade and of sort of like catching our breath after the COVID emergency to really take a look at how do we optimize our internal processes to help our capital projects, our staff, and, you know, help everybody, help our books, help everything.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wheeler. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the fact that you are starting to take a look at this, and, you know, please continue to keep us updated. Let us know how we can help as a governing body. And I do think that that's a really important piece. And then Councillor Lindell had mentioned the traffic engineer, also another area that I'm very concerned about, the fact this is not something we've been able to fill. And she mentioned probably our salary there is something that is hindering us. Would you agree that it is salary? Is there something besides salary that also, once again, that we need to be looking at to make sure that we get this very important position filled?
Thank you, Chairman and Councillor Cassett, for that question as well. I think we did just adjust the salary. We had it run, we eliminated the requirement for the professional engineer license, and we allowed for the person to achieve their professional engineer license within 2 years. So that was a significant decrease in the requirements. However, when we ran that through SAFE with current salary in the marketplace, the salary stayed the same. So now you're hiring a non-PE, much more like somebody 2 or 3 years out of school, for the same money that we had been for the last 3 years trying to hire a professional engineer for. So we virtually increased the pay significantly. I think the challenge with that position is 2 things. One of them is we need a stronger recruiting process, and we've been discussing this, right? It's not just posted on the city's website for 2 weeks is not gonna find you great candidates from all over the country, as competitive as the market is here. And so us inside Public Works, we need to take some initiative, post the positions for a month, make sure we put it on our LinkedIn, that we get it out on professional websites, that we use our networks to spread the word about these positions. And so we're gonna start doing a better job at that. The other thing is I just think that youth are not becoming traffic engineers anymore, even multimodal engineers. And so it's, you know, it really is a shaking the tree kind of a thing, maybe building relationships with colleges. But you all should know that in the meantime, we do have a professional engineer through Wilson and Company that is performing traffic engineering for us with Javier's leadership and guidance. And so I think we have 30 requests for traffic calming projects right now. And they're starting to prioritize them and take a look at them and do initial assessment and communicate with the constituents. So it's not an unworkable situation that we have now. I think it's actually quite workable, and then we'll continue to get better, you know, stronger at our recruiting process for that position.
Thank you, Dr. Wheeler. I appreciate your candid answer and looking at your own opportunities for improvement. I really, really appreciate that, and being willing to share them with us here in this forum. So thank you for working on that. And I do know that in my experience with some of the traffic requests that I've received from constituents, that part of the holdup has been COVID. I know I had a discussion about not wanting to do traffic studies during COVID for traffic calming because traffic is not what it normally is. And so it really wouldn't be a very accurate reading of whether or not it is a street. So I know that that's also been part of the holdup in some of those requests and moving some of those pieces through that. But I really appreciate you taking the time to answer these questions and to be thinking about these issues and looking for some of those constructive solutions for how we can move forward. I have no further questions at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Director Wheeler, so we heard that it looks like there's $6.8 million that's going to become available. If we do something like this GRT bond, then potentially 20 to 30 million. How does something like Bicentennial Pool get addressed? I mean, because then people are going to say, look at all the money the city has. Why can't they just fix the pool, even if it costs $3 or $4 million? So what's the plan for getting those things addressed so that something like Bicentennial Pool does get rebuilt?
Thank you, Chairman, for that question. Yes, Bicentennial Pool is on the top of the list for that GRT bond for sure. So I think whatever we need to rebuild that pool, we'll be putting that on the list for consideration. We don't have the quote yet, even still, but I think whether it's 1 to 3 million, whatever it is, since a big new complex, as Councilor Romero Worth reminded us a few meetings ago, will be a long planning process and then design and construction, that we need to get our outdoor pool fixed that we have, and then take that as a separate project. There's a number of other critical needs that we've actually compiled the list of deferred maintenance needs that we'll be bringing forward with this sort of list for consideration against the bond. One of them is the airport is about to go out to bid, and it's very likely that bid's going to come back in over budget. And so it would be great if we say it's 10% over budget. That's 10 million, maybe it's going to be, I mean, that's 1 million, maybe it's going to be 2 million over budget. Like to put a placeholder in the GRT bond for that as well. City Hall got serious problems. City Hall's carrying about a $10 million repair price tag on it right now. We'll need to pick and choose what we want to do to that in the interim, but the HVAC is like a $3 million project. Genevieve Chavez has some significant deferred maintenance. That's a very expensive facility.
Yeah, I just had to get off camera. Yeah.
Brad, you're on.
Brad,
your mic's on.
3 years ago, we did a graph and it showed all the
Thanks, Fred. So Genevieve Chavez is on the list for another $2.5 million for its stucco. It's got holes in it. It's allowing air to go back and forth. And so we are compiling the list of critical deferred needs, and I think BC Pool will be at the top of that list.
Okay, so you described, we've got all these projects that are deferred maintenance, then we got potentially new projects, and then we've got roads, and then we have, we haven't even talked Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So is there like are they a bunch of different plans, or is there one capital improvement project plan that kind of categorizes, here's the deferred maintenance projects we want you to prioritize for us, here's the new projects, here's the roads, and then here's the sources of money that we can put to each? Or is that too simplistic? Is it more complicated than that?
Thank you, Chairman. That's actually really well put, I think. So the list of all of our capital needs is about a $350 million list. And so we kind of take from that master list when these funding opportunities arise. And like we're doing that with roads all the time. So, the study on St. Michael's Drive for the potential road diet, that's being funded by DOT, Guadalupe Bridge, So we have this big master list of capital needs. And then as funding arises, we pull things off of that list to say, this is what the priorities right now. We usually pull like 10 million more and then let people weed it down. But I hear what you're saying about like, how are we ever going to build the new city hall? Like, where is that on the plan? And so while I will be putting together one list for your consideration for the GRT bond, we'll probably make that like a $40 million list and then meet with the department directors, help get their prioritization input, meet with each of the districts and the counselors in those districts and get their prioritization. And then I think there's sort of this separate project that's called space needs and building planning for the city. I mean, we have 100 old buildings that we're trying to maintain. That is completely uneconomical. It's unfeasible for our maintenance staff. It has efficiency issues. It has sustainability issues. And so I think we need to get serious about thinking about, okay, 5 years down the road, what buildings do we want to be closing and what buildings do we want to be opening and how do we get there? And my thought is, Chairman and members of the committee, is that we'll also then be starting to think about the GO bond, which is, I think, next on Brad's list. with things like bigger things like the fire department needs a new training facility. That's a $14 million facility. We need a new city hall. That's $40 million. We need a new main library, probably 20 million. And so we need to start thinking about these big projects, and then how do we get ourselves there? And is Grt Bond part of it? Is GRT? Do we start doing just some studies? And so I'll definitely work with the directors and start to map that out for us for consideration so we can make a plan.
Okay,
Mr.
thank you.
Chair,
Go
if I
ahead,
may.
Brad, then Councilor Liddell, and then Councilor Romero Worth.
the point of this exercise was, the immediate GRT bond, which we have a calendar in your packet. And the point of this discussion is what do we do about this GRT bond? We did the 2018 GRT bond. We had the 5-year capital plan. We had the senior ICIP, the ICIP. We have a ton of CIP plans out there and how they're organized. But from that list, it was weeded down to 19 projects where an in-depth analysis of what it would cost, what it would do, who it would serve, what district it was in, and all of the fundamental questions were answered. And then that was the 2018 Grt Bond Package. And so in this case, this isn't the first time Director Wheeler and I've had this conversation that we need to get that list put together. Those projects need to be weeded out. And again, this is a calendar. The council has a great deal of flexibility in this. This is just a proposed calendar that would achieve that there would be capital for the Public Works Department to spend come the spring of 2022. Hopefully we would go to the market sometime in February. Cash would be in the city's coffer and they would be able to deploy it then. But yeah, we really need to focus on the fundamentals. And this is just, again, with an idea that this is out there. It was driven by the lack of capital prior, in the GRT. And so, again, there's a lot of flexibility for the council to proceed at a pace it's comfortable with. And if it, wants to look at the big picture and do, finance department has been working and our economist has been working on a 5-year revenue forecast, and that really the city will get back to its practice of looking, especially in its capital, over a longer period of time. But that's not what this discussion's about.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Liddell, and then Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, thank you for bringing up bicentennial pool. This may not be the right forum to talk about it in, but we have got to get that pool into repair time. And I don't know when we think that these bonds, Brad, when do we think that these will be funded and that we'll have the monies?
This calendar, I believe, suggests sometime in February we would actually.
Well, I'm sorry that's too late. Do we have monies that we could use to get that project going sooner? If we wait until February to get that project going, that pool's not going to be ready for use for next summer. We need to see bids on that pool this summer, and we need to see repairs started this year on that pool.
There are tools that we can use if we knew when we were going to spend the money. It's we could do a reimbursement resolution, and basically what we say is we're going to spend this money now, but we're going to reimburse ourselves out of this bond proceeds in February next year. And so that would be one tool to use.
Okay.
It wouldn't affect any other decision or any other project within the city. It's just pulling those funds forward.
Ms. Wheeler, when do you think we're going to have a bid on what that repair is going to cost us?
Chairman, Counselor Lindell, it's due from the vendor in about a week, and that is just their quote. So I think we'll have it soon. It's a notoriously bad time to try to get quotes from pool companies when they're so busy with summer, but Sam's pushing on them, and we should have it soon. And we do have state price agreement opportunity to sort of start work on that bid once they provide it and we decide to fund it.
Okay. Chair, I'm not sure how we bring that forward, if we need to do the reimbursement resolution and then get going on that. Does anybody know how that would work? Because I do not want to wait until next year to start moving dirt at Bicentennial Pool, because that means Bicentennial Pool will not be open next year. Anybody know how that works?
Mr. Chair, I believe Peter Franklin, the city's bond counsel, can answer that.
Thank you, Peter.
Mr. Chair, Counselor, thanks for the question. Basically, the way it works is that the city council would adopt a reimbursement resolution specifying how much it expects to spend on that capital project, and that it expects to reimburse itself from proceeds of a tax-exempt bond issue within 18 months after making the actual expenditures. So really, as long as the resolution is adopted no more than 60 days after the first capital expenditure made, we're in good shape from a timing perspective. So if we expect to make the first expenditure on November 1st, we would need to adopt the reimbursement resolution within 60 days after that. We can always adopt the resolution before making the very first capital expenditure.
Okay.
And that's probably the safer way to go.
Okay, so Ms. Wheeler, could you let us know, or could you certainly let me know when we get the bid for repair to Bicentennial Pool?
Chairman, Counselor Lindell, yes, absolutely. I can do that.
Is there any part of this discussion, Ms. Wheeler, that gives you pause, that you think that we couldn't proceed with this if we were to have the council do a reimbursement resolution?
Chairman, Counselor Lindell, that's exactly what we were thinking that we should do. The only piece of pause that I have is that it's a big project and we've got a big old winter sitting in the middle of it. So I think we still don't know what it looks like for the prognosis for next year.
Yeah, that's the problem that I'm worried about, is that if we wait for winter to be over, then we're at March and it pretty much guarantees that we won't have a pool for next summer. So that's why I would like to get this started. I mean, we are in June, we could have July, August, September, October, potentially November, 5 months to get a good start on a repair.
Thank you, Chairman and Counselor Lindell. I'd said subtract a month from that for our internal processes at least, if not 2.
Let's see if we can't all be helpful and not subtract 2. So I think that it's clear to everyone here the direction that I want to go with that. I just don't think that it's acceptable to not have that pool ready for next summer. It makes no sense to me whatsoever that we wouldn't. So thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just start with Bicentennial Pool since that's where we are. The only thing I would caution is, do we know how much roughly? Are we talking a couple $1 million to fix that pool? Or are we talking, I mean, I've heard all kinds of things that, you know, we're going to have to dig it all up and start and basically put in a new pool. And I mean, do we know that it's going to be only a couple $1 million?
Chairman, Councilor Romero Worth, we don't have a number. People, like you said, the experts won't give us a number. We're comparing to like whole new pool facilities that are running around 8 million. That's not what this would be, right? This is just the pool itself. And so that's why we're kind of using the 2 million as a working number, but you're right, we don't have a number.
Yeah, I just don't want us to get too far ahead of ourselves. I understand how badly this city needs an outdoor pool and a good one. And I know how important this pool is to the community, but I also, until we know what we're looking at here, I don't know that we know what's the right and fiscally responsible path to be starting down. And you know, if we put, we don't know what we're dealing with. We don't know how much it's going to cost. We don't know how long it buys us. We don't know whether our money would be better spent starting over. You know, I have said before that, you know, it's quite possible that we do need to repair this pool to buy us the time while we build another pool. I mean, I just think right now we're kind of, we don't know what we're dealing with. And so I would just caution that, I mean, I think it's good. I think it's good to know that we have options if it's the path we want to go down. But until we know what kind of a bite it's going to take and whether we have the resources to do it and what other things it flies up against, I think we need to just be cautious here a little bit is all I would caution. Director Wheeler, you threw out a number, $350 million in capital. In capital projects across the city? And does that include like the fire station and the airport, or is that deferred maintenance, or what is that number comprise?
Chairman, Councilor Romero Worth, it's right. It's the big number. It's the training facility. It's all of the roads. It's all of the facilities. It's a new main library. It's fixing City Hall. It's replacing City Hall. It's the whole,
Okay.
all of the needs.
And deferred maintenance is in there too?
That's correct, to the amount that we have visibility, although that does sort of arise more on an annual basis as HVAC fails. For deferred maintenance, I think our software that we have been using to track our capital needs to maintain our facilities at a functional level indicate about a $5 million a year investment in our facilities is required to keep them operational.
Okay, but that's just our facilities. What about deferred maintenance and roads and infrastructure?
That's a separate, that's on that. And I would say 5 million a year in roads is really the least we need to spend too.
Okay, but so deferred maintenance on other buildings and that kind of thing is yet another number.
A lot of the deferred maintenance is included in the $350 million list, but it's very dynamic. Some of it's been completed. There's new arising all the time. It's not a hard number. There's no,
Okay.
That's why we don't publish that report. It's
Right.
a very dynamic working list.
But it does include what we need to keep up all the different city buildings we have within that.
It keeps up with more like what's known. So for instance, the main library elevators are on the list. They've been known for a couple of years. I'm not, the Genevieve Chavez stucco probably is on the list, but BC Pool's probably not on the list because we didn't know last year that it needed to be replaced. So it's very dynamic from the deferred maintenance perspective.
Okay. And to what degree do you think, so the Washington Post this morning had a very interesting article on the state of the economy. And I think, you know, our financial people were talking about interest rates and inflation and all of that. Talked about the cost of construction and supply prices really going up. How do you think that, like, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but as we look at projects now and the cost and supply prices are increasing, how do we, I don't know, plan for that in a way?
Chairman, Councilor Romero Worth, that's a really important exercise for us to undertake, especially as we get moving with this GRT bond, because we're going to be jumping right into that market. We're going to find out more. We're about to bid the airport. We're about to bid the teen center. So we'll be finding out about that. I think probably so we have 3 types of estimates that we work with on capital projects. The first one is the budgetary estimate. That's the one that we use to put a bond package together, where we try to get a number that's big enough to hold the scope. It's from our experience, it's the right ballpark. For an example, we were carrying $4.5 million on the fire station 2 for the longest time. It ended up being 6.5. So budgetary estimates tend to be rough estimates. We should definitely err on the high side this time. The next estimate's a design estimate. So once you actually design the facility, then you can actually have the engineers cost it, that you're getting better there. You're getting much closer. That's what we're working with the airport right now. In the teen center, we've got design estimates. And then there's the construction estimate. That's the one that you get after you go out to bid. And so, the further away you are back in the process, the more uncertainty you have built into your estimate. But I think Sam and I, as we put together the sort of capital project estimates, should be adding at least 20% right now, given what we're seeing in the marketplace.
Thank you. I just think it's interesting. I mean, we're talking now about, just issuing a bond to create a pot of money, and we're not even to the point. I mean, you will probably, you're further along in this thinking than perhaps we are, but in terms of, all right, what are you actually going to spend it on, and getting the design and then the construction costs. And so that's like way down the road. And whatever we're saying today, to your point, it is going to cost more, at least the way the world looks right now. So unless that somehow corrects, but I don't hear anybody saying that. So, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't belabor this anymore.
Okay, so let's hear briefly about Geo Bond.
Mr. Chair, and the last item, while the calendar for the GRT has a lot of flexibility for the councilors and the governing body, the Geo Bond is not flexible. And namely because in order to get it onto the, I'll share my screen. I'll make it bigger. Let's see, can I make it bigger? We have a deadline that's not movable. Bond election resolution transmitted to the Santa Fe County Clerk with requests that she forward the resolution to the Secretary of State no later than August 26th. And we do have Bond Counsel Peter Franklin with us. So no later than the 23rd, or 70 days prior to the election. And so at that point in time, we have to have a fully formulated Geo Bond question for the public to approve. That would be roughly, it has to be very specific on the projects, size, mainly the projects would have to be determined. And then the bond counsel would have all the other things that needed to be filed with the clerk ready. And so then once the election occurs in November and the public has made their decision, if it's yes, then we would proceed with issuing the bonds. If it was a no, it would be the end of it. I'll defer any other question, explanation to bond counsel.
Okay, well, what about, let's go to capacity and then impacts on property tax rates.
Well, again, Mr. Chair, this would be in competition with existing funds, existing capital projects, and the GRT bond. If we were to do a GO and a GRT, again, we only have so much in public works, and again, we can only deploy so much funds. GO bonds are somewhat different. I believe we have up to 4 years, but maybe that's on issuance, not on spending. Peter, are we still required to spend proceeds within 3 years?
Mr. Chairman and Brad, that's correct. The spending requirements are the same. The GO bond questions are good for 4 years at a time.
Oh,
So in
thank you.
other words, the voters could approve the question this November, and the city would have up to 4 years to actually issue the bonds.
Okay, a question, a specific reason I'm interested in this, and I think other members of the governing body are, is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and having a source for that, and this potentially being the source. I believe we put $3 million in there this last budget. If we don't bond now in November and say we wait till next November, is there another way to get money into that fund so that we can put it off a year if we need to? And I don't know if that's you, Brad, or Alexis.
I'll leave that for Alexis.
I'm not sure. I'm not clear what your question is. I'm sorry.
My
Mr.
concern
Chair.
my concern with not doing a bond this November is we're gonna run out of money in our Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Okay. But we put $3 million in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund this cycle and for 22.
Okay, so we've kind of earmarked for 22 also.
Right,
So we've got-
exactly.
So,
Yes.
if we didn't make the calendar this November, the following November should be just as good, because there's 2 years worth of $3 million
Correct,
allocations to that fund.
correct.
Okay,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
so we put in, I'm not sure, I don't think that's quite correct. So we put in $3 million in this fiscal year that ends June 30th, correct? And that's 2021. That the fiscal year we're in now is 2021, is FY21, correct?
Correct,
Okay,
Mr. Chair.
yeah. And then we put in another $3 million for FY22, which starts July 1st. So we have $3 million. So to your point, Chairman, that will end in June 30th, 2022. And if we put something on the ballot for a GO bond to fund the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in November of 2022, we have a little bit of a gap. And so, and I don't know when that money would, become available after, if the voters approved it in November, when we'd actually have access to those funds. So we may be looking at having to either find, what I'll call gap funding, maybe another infusion from the general fund to buy us time if we ultimately decide GO bonds are the way to go and we don't put it in front of the voters until 2022, if that makes sense. And I guess as long as I have the floor, Mr. Chair, maybe I can ask our bond counsel, Mr. Franklin. So once you put it on so we put it on the ballot in November, whether it's 2021 or 2022, how long before we see those revenues? Is that also like a February kind of thing, or?
It would probably be, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman and Councilor Romero-Worth, it would probably be in the range of 75 to 90 days after voter approval. So I think February is a pretty good placeholder.
Just like Mr. Chair and Mr. Franklin, so just just like with the GRT bond, we wouldn't actually see real money until the February timeframe.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I want to point out to the counselors that the lodger's tax over 30 days is now flowing to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund as of May 1st. And over this next 6 months, 10 months, we're going to be monitoring that very closely. Our estimate, the tourism director and my estimate was, conservative to say what we think, but there could be a substantial cash flow going into the Housing Trust Fund that we just have never measured before. This is completely new money to the city. The other item I'd like to point out is the community development director pointed out that the potential land sales over the next several years are also, if they're not enterprise or Santa Fe Estates dedicated to another fund, would be going to the Alaska or the Affordable Housing Trust Fund as well. And so there's a lot of unknown, but there's a lot of potential, especially with the over 30-day lodger's tax.
Right. And Mr. Chair, I think what we're trying to do here is evaluate different ways of finding sustainable sources to fund the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And that's part of what this conversation is, what are the different mechanisms? One that has been brought to our attention as something that we should explore is the GO bond, which is why we're interested in why these questions are being raised. And so I do think the chair did want to get to the capacity. I don't know, and Mr. Chair, I'll yield the floor because I think you wanted to hear from staff about what our GO bond capacity is. So I'll look forward to that conversation.
Okay, well, let me go to Councilwoman Cassette because it's probably right on this point since her hand came up. So go ahead, Councilwoman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Bradley, can you remind us how much the conservative estimate was about the 30-day lodger's tax, what we thought that would bring in?
Mr. Chair, Counselor, I believe that was dedicated to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was $347,000 annually.
Wonderful. And thank you for bringing up those other sources, but I do want to remind the members of the committee that we talked about a $3 million floor, not a $3 million goal, and then we're moving on. But that's what we have really talked about as the bottom of what we would like to see with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And so I think it is helpful to look at something like a GO bond that can get us to that $3 million floor. And then some of these other more variable resources that we can't quite fully count on exactly what that's going to look like year over year, that does help to get us above that floor and to continue to look for other sources. I'm also interested in the capacity, so I'll go ahead and yield back to you, Mr. Chair, so that we can continue with that discussion, because I think that's a really big piece of this and what Bradley mentioned about the kind of the competing interests and how all of that fits together in that puzzle. So I'll yield the floor.
Okay, thank you. Before we get to that though, Brad or Alexis, we're closing out the fiscal year. Councilwoman Romero Worth said we put $3 million in. Did all that get expended, or there's going to be money we're going to carry over into this next fiscal year that we start next 2 weeks from now?
Mr. Chair, we can take a look at that, run a report for you and get it to you in the next day or two to tell you exactly what's been expended, and then we'll roll it forward into next fiscal year.
Okay, so whatever was not expended, we will roll forward. Okay, great. Okay, so let's hear about capacity and then impacts to property tax rates.
So, Mr. Chair, given that the city's taxable value is roughly $4.5 billion and our tax or the maximum outstanding GO bond can be 4% of the taxable value. That would put the capacity for the city's general obligation debt at 180 million, almost 181 million. Subtract the 20 million. So it's roughly around 161 million of new GO bond debt capacity the city has. There is one other statutory limit on the amount. Oh, no, that's operational mills. Sorry. Thank you, Peter. One of the, there's some issue on how many mills you can charge for debt capacity. Peter, we had discussed that upper limit of could the city issue, how much could the city issue in debt capacity? Because these are general obligation bonds, they are full faith and credit of the city. And so they would set the mill rate to whatever was necessary. DFA would set the mill rate at whatever is necessary to make that debt service payment for the coming year. Is that correct, Peter?
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Flitch, yes, that is correct. I don't think there's an operational mill rate cap, but a debt service mill levy is technically unlimited as to rate or amount. So really it's just that 4% of total taxable value. That's the upper limit on, that translates to an upper limit on the debt service levy rate. But obviously the city is not going to want to issue the full amount of, issuing GO bonds in an amount equal to 4% of the city's total taxable value would be pretty unheard of.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So do we have have we ever done this, issued GO bonds? Do we have any outstanding right now?
Mr. Chair, we have the 2014 and 2013 GO bonds outstanding. And last year we refunded the 2010 GO bond to the 2019. So yes, we have done this before.
So what percentage, Mr. Chair, do we have issued of that 4%?
20 million out of the 180 million.
20 million out of 180 million, okay. And for some reason, I thought the state legislature dictated how many mill levies we could use. Is that not true?
Mr. Chair, there is a statute that limits the operational mill rate for the municipality at 7.65 mils.
So as a practical matter, translate for me, what does that mean?
Currently, the city, for its residential property, has 1.582 mils, and we have excess capacity that we could issue operational mill rates, and that would be for the operation of the city. You could dedicate it to the general fund. We have, of the 7.65 mils maximum, we have 6.068 mils available on residential property and 4.467 mils available on commercial property.
Can you put that in a memo to us?
I believe I attached this to my property tax calculator in the document. I think it was the last page.
Okay, of this last, gotcha, this last item.
Yeah, and it says statutory max operational mill. It's the top box.
Yep, okay.
And so on that document, that really ties into the impact on a homeowner and property. So the homeowner impact to implement 1 mill will raise the property tax on a fair market value by the assessor of $300,000 home, taxable value $100,000 home, same house, but it's only taxable as 1/3, and 1 mill would be $100 annually.
And how much would that generate again in a bond?
And so, Mr. Chair, the next, if we continue down on the table, in this case, what we're trying to figure out is how many mills does it take to generate $500,000? And on the table just below that, it shows you for a 20-year bond, GO bond, you would have to raise $701 a year in property tax to generate enough money for a $10 million bond. So to answer your question, you know, we would have to raise property tax on a $300,000 taxable value home, $300,000 fair market value home that's $100,000 taxable. You would have to raise it about 0.167 mils, or about $18 annually to raise $10 million in principal.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
but that, Brad, is for the operational piece.
A mill's a mill.
Okay. So it transfers. So I guess what would be helpful, and I think I've said this before, Mr. Chair, is for staff to show us something similar to what Albuquerque does, because that's what people are saying to us we should be looking at as a funding source for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So how much does Albuquerque issue in GO bond? How much money does it generate? What does it do to people's property taxes? And how often do they have to issue those GO bonds in order to continue to fund their affordable housing program? And I mean, again, they are given to us as the model for how we would structure a GO bond here. And I guess I'd love to see what exactly it is they do, and how does that translate up here? Does that make sense? Are we too small? Are we too big? Are we, does that make sense in this community? What are the pros and the cons? That's what we really need to see.
And Mr. Chair, Counselor, and we did work out that bond, ask that bond question, and the municipal advisor and I were working on, we looked at the last 5 years of county property tax certificates. 5 years ago, the debt service mill rate was 0.785 mils. Currently, we're at 0.37 something mils. And when we've issued GO bonds in the past, our plan was to have level debt service, so that if we borrowed X amount of dollars, we paid $500,000 a year, whether it be interest in interest in principal. And so that was the city's plan in the past. And to go with their model, so the only thing that causes that debt service to decline, the mill rate, is property values increasing. because our GO bond debt service has been $1.6 million flat for the last 5 years. But the decline in mill rate from 0.78 to 0.37 is entirely driven by increased property valuation. And so we would have to guess what that property tax in order to figure it out. And with $4.5 billion, it sounds like a big number, but when you cut it down to what level, 4% of the change doesn't give you a whole bunch of money to borrow. And so given that we use so little of our capacity, many other communities have much higher property tax rates and much lower GRT rates. And that would be a discussion, but that's one reason why we don't really fit the Albuquerque model too well.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, I think that this is exactly the kind of information we need to know, right? As we work on our Affordable Housing Trust Fund resolution, where we're, using the committee process to ask questions about the different ideas that have been brought to us so that we can understand the pros and the cons, whether things that have been suggested are actually viable, whether there's support for these kinds of mechanisms. I continue to maintain that as we're coming out of a global pandemic, this may not be, the right timing. But again, I think through our work plan, we have said we will vet all of these ideas and understand and begin to understand what's the pro, what's the con, what makes sense. And to your earlier point, Brad, I think is that we may have other places to look in terms of, the lodger's tax and the land sales. And, we also have the state legislature cannabis cut for local governments. So I think it's, these are all the things. I don't want to scare anybody out there. I think what we're trying to do is figure out, what are the different mechanisms we have? What are the pros and cons of each of them so that we can figure out how do we put a patchwork of funding together that gets us at that floor that Councilor Cassett was talking about earlier, and then helps us build from there and maintain this commitment to affordable housing and funding the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So I think this is all good information, and I know we're going to go into a study session with the whole governing body, and it might be helpful if we could put this in some sort of a memo, not just the graphs, but sort of outlining why we're different than Albuquerque, why we would have to do something different if we wanted to do this, and what are the pros, what are the cons, that kind of thing. Because again, we are going to have to go with the whole governing body to evaluate which direction to go in.
Right. I think that's a good suggestion. And as part of that vetting, I think if we can start with what we know today, for example, what is the carryover from this last allocation of the 3 million? We'll add it to the 3 million that we budgeted. If you have a better estimate of the lodger's tax over 30 days, and if there's any pending sales right now, not future sales, because it would be helpful to know as we make these decisions, especially related to a GO bond, well, we're going to be fine because we have $6 or $7 million over the next 2 years or 3 years. Because then maybe there's not so much pressure then to push a GO bond in November. But if that's not the case, then we need to know that too. But because it's sounding to me like there might be plenty of money between now and November 2022, and there might not be a rush to do this GO bond now, especially given the calendar that you went over. But it'd be helpful to have that information sooner rather than later.
And Mr. Chair, too, in the past, the city has used its GO bonds differently, it's been really dedicated to parks and, infrastructure that supports the citizens. if it was a more timely issue, it would be a great thing for Bicentennial Pool, or as some people have been suggesting, a pool in the south side. But, you know, I mean, that would be something the public would want to have a say on, you know, possibly. And so when you think about GO bonds, you know, it's really the public's opportunity to, because the nice thing about a GO bonds from the city's perspective, it doesn't spend any of our money, the city council's money. It's all new money being dedicated by the citizens.
Right. And some part of our consideration in order to put that question in front of them is, do they feel we're doing a good enough job with what the projects now? Or, and then we have that park bond issue that happened years ago. And so there's you know, there's a lot of work to do still, I think, because we are asking the public to basically give us this money and we'll give you these projects. They'll give us the money, but are they convinced we'll give them the projects? So, okay, any other questions or comments related to this? And then if not, we'll move on to the consent items that were pulled.
I guess the only thing I would just say, Mr. Chair, is that, you know, Brad, I think this is the second time you brought this up. I think in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the kinds of things that we're trying to do to build a spectrum of housing in this city, there are things where a GO bond, where GO bond monies could be useful. But I don't think we're quite, I don't know if we're at a point yet where we can articulate specifically what those things are. And so this is also part of the planning that would have to happen, and voters would have to decide that that's something they wanted to support. And we as counselors, again, you know, we're charged with vetting all the ideas that have come to us and to begin to understand the pros and cons of all these things. So I just add that additional comment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, anything else from the committee on this topic? No? Okay, thank you, staff. Yeah.
Given the tightness of the GO bond calculator, there is one predicating assumption staff has made, and that is that the governing body would not want to go to a special election because that would open up the flexibility. Otherwise, this is a November question.
Right, you're talking special election, maybe early 2022 though.
Right, you know, and so, I mean, I would like to take this, you know, the calendar that, just a direction that there is no way we're going to hit the August 23rd date, or should we even try?
I don't know. I don't know if we could make it or not, given but that's why, like I said, it'd be helpful though to know that we're going to be fine as far as the Affordable Housing Trust Fund if we don't make the November. So if you can bring us back that information, again, the carryover from this fiscal year that's ending next week, the 3 million that we still have, and then if there's other funds that you think you're pretty certain are going to go into the fund, then we can feel comfortable, not just us, but even the affordable housing advocates in the community, that we've got this trust fund covered for the next couple of years. And then hopefully by that point, we're ready to go out with a bond.
And Mr. Chair, I was also informed that as if this was a priority of the city council, that, you know, like FY22, in the budget, it has the authority to assign, a $3 million amount to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Right. Okay. Councilwoman Villarreal.
Actually, I'd like to hear from Alexis. I think she has additional information for us.
Oh, thank you very much, Councilwoman and Mr. Chair. I just wanted to remind everyone that we built the $3 million into the base budget. So we put it in this fiscal year, we put it in 22, and we're planning to continue to do that into 23 because we've made it part of the base budget now. I mean, we can always reduce it if we have other funding source. I'm not saying that, but we've built it into the base budget.
Okay, that's great to know. Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think it'd be helpful, and I don't know if it necessarily has to happen tonight, but Alexandra is on with us, and I think she has a better idea of some other aspects of fundings, including the funds that, I don't know if there's a projection of what would occur in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund based on what revenue we get now. But there is, it has been going up recently. And then, I don't know if Alexandra, I see her, but would it be helpful for you all to have that information, or is that going to be better for, actually, I would like to hear from Alexandra, just because we keep talking like how this could play forward or move forward. And I guess I just wanted to get your take on this and the ability to spend it. I mean, that to me is a big issue if we don't have staff hired yet, but can you share some insight with us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal. We are collecting more fees, but again, because our sole source up to this point for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund has been development fees, and so there's really no way to predict that amount. So having the infusion from the general fund is wonderfully helpful. You will be seeing an extension to several contracts to add the current year funding to those contracts, as well as a plan for how to allocate next year's funding. I believe that something like the bond issue is probably the long-term direction we need to go in, because it is, we need something predictable. It's very hard to build a consistent program and leverage the support over the years if we don't, any given year, we're not sure how much we're gonna have. I hope, did I answer your question, Councilor Villarreal?
Yeah, and I guess I was just curious what you thought based on some of the research that you know about the Albuquerque Geo Bond. I mean, we've even had speakers come to talk to us in Santa Fe. It was a few years ago, but the deadline, as you heard, is in August. So it just sounds like there will be things I thought you would also have to do in order to prepare. I mean, I know it's a financial structures that we need, but I'm just curious what your thoughts on that, on the Geo Bond idea for November.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal, I think, let me just make sure I'm understanding. I'm sorry, it is so hot in my house right now, I can barely think. Let me just make sure I'm understanding your question. The process of the Geo Bond requires a bunch of paperwork, both upfront and probably following it. I've never gone through it before, so I can't necessarily speak to that, but I think that's what we're thinking is probably likely. So what you're asking is whether we have the capacity to do that extra work just to even get the process going for the bond. Is that?
Yes, it's hot where I'm at too, so it's hard for me to articulate as well.
Well, I mean, I guess what I would say is I'll do what I have to do. You know, it's not, I feel like if we go in that direction now, I have no expertise in this area. So I would rely on Mr. Flitch and our bond counsel to give us the good advice on how to manage that process. But of course, you know, my team, we're going to do what we need to do to get the funds in there.
Right, but it sounds like we have a commitment over the next 2 years, not just this fiscal year, but the following fiscal year, to put $3 million in each year. So it's sounding to me like we don't need to do this November.
Mr. Chair, you're correct. Okay,
thanks. Sorry, Councilwoman Villarreal, go ahead.
That was my next question, so I'm good. Thank you. Thanks, Alexander.
And Mr. Chair, if I can, and again, I just want to say what we need to be doing now is evaluating all these different things and figuring out, to Alexandra's point, you know, what she needs is predictability. So what we're trying to do is, you know, vet and explore all the different options about how, you know, and unless we're just gonna forever just pull it out of the general fund. But the thing is, we may have other places to pull from, and that's what we're exploring. And And we have to see, we have to see with the other counselors and see with the broader community. How do, everybody says they're for affordable housing. We know we need to fund this fund. How are we going to do that? And this, I think, is a good conversation about some, I guess not just one, but some of the different mechanisms we may be able to employ to help us.
Okay, anyone else before we move on to the consent calendar items? Okay, thank you, staff. It's looking like we probably won't do a bond this November because of the commitment that I think we heard this evening we at least have that floor of 3 million met for the next 2 fiscal years. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Then let's move on to our the items that were pulled from consent. I will log off now. Councilwoman Romero Worth, if you could handle item B, and then I'll log back on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we will go to item B, and I just need to pull it up on my agenda. Sorry. Item B, does somebody have this up and can read it? Hold on. PrimeGov being slow, sorry.
I
went back too many pages. Do you want to read the caption
Sure.
of item B?
Request for approval of volunteer station agreement with the Boys and Girls Club of Santa Fe. No financial responsibility for the foster grandparent program, Boys and Girls Club of Santa Fe. I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item B of our consent calendar. Is there any discussion on this? I think we can take a roll call then.
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes.
Okay, it passes.
Terrific. Let's get our chair back.
I just texted him to log back in.
Okay, great. You're faster. You're faster on the text than I am.
In that moment.
I think we're going to go to item.
Wait, who's running the meeting? He said he needs to
Okay,
have them rejoin.
we can move to item E if he needs. So this is a resolution relating to income disparity and inequity, authorizing the execution of a memorandum of understanding with mayors for a guaranteed income and the Santa Fe Community College to assist with launching a pilot project to support young parents enrolled at the Santa Fe Community College and to build support for a guaranteed income in the city of Santa Fe. We have Julie Sanchez and Kira Ochoa with us. And I think Councilor Lindell, you pulled this item among others, correct?
Yeah, Counselor, I don't know who is controlling this meeting, but they do need to let Counselor Beta back in.
Let's see. Alexis, can you do that?
Counselor- Well, he's not popping up to be admitted, so I'm wondering if Joe didn't assign it to me. I don't have the ability to, but anyone. Yeah, I can see their participants. I don't have.
Well, I see him. He's an attendee, but I don't have the power to promote him.
Here, let me see.
I'll call Joe if we need to.
Yeah, please, would you?
No one else is a host?
I think the chair was a host and Alexis maybe was a host.
Yeah, he said he made me a host, but I am not finding where I have the ability to admit anyone.
So we're all paralyzed.
Hold on.
Joe's working on it. He'll pulling over his car and logging on, and I'll take care
Right.
of it.
We'll
Sorry, everyone.
We'll stand in place while we wait for the chair. Sorry, I didn't realize. I thought he was needing.
He
do
just
something else.
texted and said, go on without him. He's
Alexis,
waiting.
have you tried clicking on his name and right clicking and those things?
I pull up participants and I don't see him.
How about, okay. you
And
don't
he's
see
not
any-
on my screen anywhere where I can,
He's not in attendees?
I only have the live on YouTube. I don't have an attendees. Participants, I don't have attendees.
Okay. He's there. There's 18 panelists and 1 attendee.
Alexis, I can see him. This is Fran. I can see him in the attendees. You just need to go and let him in.
Joe's here. Thanks, Joe.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Joe.
I guess I didn't make Alexis the host. I apologize about that. I thought I did.
Sorry about all that, guys. I was trying.
Yeah. Okay. Let me get him back in. And then Alexis, I'll make sure you're host before I leave.
Thanks, Joe.
Yep. All right. He's back in.
There he is.
Okay, that was like Interstellar. Remember, see that movie where he's trying to communicate? Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, I read the caption. We've introduced the staff, and I believe Councilor Lindell was one of the counselors to pull this item, and that's where we stopped.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councilor Lindell.
Thank you. I've got some questions on this, on what the cost will be, how we make it sustainable. How does this get past our anti-donation clause? How do people qualify? What's the criteria? Who's going to administer it? Just, I need a little bit more information about this program. And, you know, how it's going to be administered, who qualifies for it, what the criteria is to stay in the program, all of those kinds of things.
Madam, Mr. Chair, Councilor Lindell, I'll try to take the first part and maybe Julie can fill in my blanks. In terms of, you asked about sustainability. So this is a national project that many cities have joined, following on from the Stockton pilot project, which had promising results to show that essentially the guaranteed income functioned as a bridge to help people get, the results from Stockton showed that people were more likely to get employed and to not need the funding in an ongoing way. In terms of sustainability, it's part of a national effort to essentially create a federal guaranteed income policy. So, you know, I don't think, I would be surprised if anyone was coming back to ask for sustainability out of our general fund for something like this. Although if this council decides that's something they want to explore, that is certainly possible. So that's around the sustainability. It's 100% grant funded, and we aim to do, I know the mayor aims to do some fundraising that will make it, turn it from a 1-year pilot into a 2-year pilot ideally, and up the dollar amount that recipients receive monthly. So 100 parents who are students at the community college will be eligible for the income. And it'll be a guaranteed floor of $400 a month for 1 year for 100 people. 15 of those folks are already enrolled and part of an Santa Fe Community Foundation project called Expanding Opportunities for Young Families. That's proven to be a really effective model for providing supports that are not just income, but that will be duplicated for the rest of the community college students. In terms of the anti-donation question, the eligibility is folks are under 200% federal poverty level, which means they are indigent. And so they are not subject to the anti-donation. And in addition, the funding is not coming through our government. It's private funding. Actually, that's more important than my first answer. It's private funding coming to the Santa Fe Community College Foundation, which will be the fiscal agent for all of the funds. And Julie, did I leave anything out that you wanted to add?
Good evening, counselors and Counselor Lindell. Kira, you got a good chunk of it. In terms of administration, I think that was the only piece that was left out. And currently administration is going to be as part of the Community College Foundation and the Community College.
The only other part that I wasn't completely clear about it was to qualify. It sounds like it has to be a parent, someone with a child. Is the child living with them? Under 200% of the area median income, and what other qualification?
Mr. Chair, Counselor Lindell, the parent needs to be 30 years or younger, and the child would be a dependent child, and the parent would be enrolled at the community college, and their income would be 200% of federal poverty level or under. And they need to be a resident of Santa Fe.
Okay, that answers my questions. Could we try to get this information into the packet for when it goes to other committees and to the council? That's all I have. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councilwoman Cassette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Kira and Julie, for being here. As I stated in Quality of Life, I'm really quite excited about this project and us having the opportunity to bring this to some of our residents and be a part of this national study. I did have a couple questions. Some of the qualifications may change. Obviously, kids get older. It's possible somebody could move out of the 200% FPL. But one piece is, what happens if they drop out of school while they are a participant in this pilot? If they're receiving dollars, they've dropped out of school, what then? Do they no longer receive that money? And then what happens to that money?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Cassett, there's no qualification that they remain in the community college. It's a study to see what happens if they are receiving this income. So that would, if they did not receive the income after they dropped out, we wouldn't know whether that impacted their volatility in terms of income, their educational outcomes, et cetera. So in that sense, it's a pure research study to show what the impact is. And the researchers were very clear that there's no requirement that recipients continue to do college. There's a research question as to whether this funding will allow them to do that.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And so at that point, they would still attempt to continue to follow up with them and understand how this money has impacted them, even if they are no longer in the school. And because we're going through the community college, I assume that the fellow might be the mechanism by which they continue to attempt to track this individual. I assume that it would get a lot harder to stay in touch with this individual if they no longer are coming to the centralized area. So do you know who would be responsible for trying to continue to gather that data?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Cassett, and Julie can help me with this. The fellow who is the project pays $20,000 stipend for a student, a PhD student in this case at UNM, who's sort of the same population that's being served to support the project. So yes, the fellow would be a mechanism for the continued evaluation of the project. And the platform that's used to deliver the funds is an opt-in. There's an opt-in mechanism for participants to sort of provide income information to that platform if they are comfortable doing so. Julie, did I leave anything out there?
No, the exciting thing about the fellow is that they're actually from the city of Santa Fe, which is fantastic, and also bilingual and also a young parent. And so they're really reflective of the community that we're targeting.
Wonderful. And we had identified that person. Are we able to be introduced to them yet, or are we still getting paperwork through?
So Chair, Councilwoman Cassett, they're actually currently being evaluated by UPenn. So they have their final kind of evaluation this week. And then once they get fully accepted, then we can make the announcement on the young student researcher or the young student fellow from the city.
Great. I look forward to hearing about that. Thank you. And then my last question has to do with what are the outcome measures specifically that UPenn is going to be tracking? I know that we're looking at educational attainment, we're looking at economic stability, but are there any other outcome measures that we are looking at, and will they continue to follow them after the 1 to 2 years?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Cassett, they're also looking at stress levels, depression levels, mental well-being of the parents. They're also looking at income volatility, so how much variation happens, on a month-to-month basis. Other pilots have shown that income volatility stabilizes even after the income, the guaranteed income is no longer being delivered, because I mean that's kind of a no-brainer. If you have more, if you have this income, it's not going to change as much. So they do track beyond, I believe, beyond the 1 year. Is that correct, Julie?
Yes, that's correct.
And then if we manage to raise enough money, or if mayor, I mean, I imagine that we all would like to help participate in raising this money, the city of Santa Fe. If we raise enough money to go for 2 years, will they continue to track for an additional 3rd year? Okay. And then I misspoke. That was not my last question. I asked this at Quality Life, and then something that I read in the MOA made me question it again. For that fundraising piece of us raising the additional funds, it said somewhere, I'm sorry, let me find my notes. It said something that all dollars for the demonstration must be secured before the first disbursement. So that would be before August. But when we talked before, we said that we don't want to close the door and we could continue to fundraise past that. So those don't quite fit for me. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Cassett, in order to tell recipients how much they will be receiving, we need to know what our beginning pot is. At a different point in time, we can, having raised additional funds, up that dollar amount if we need to. But in order to begin, it's not going to be variable for at least a certain period of time. And so we kind of work closely with MGI to determine those parameters.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I do not believe I have any further questions. Thank you guys again so much for all of your work on this. I know that you really put in a lot, and I've said this like 3 times to you, but I just don't feel I can express my gratitude for you working on this program and getting us into this really exciting project. So thank you.
Okay, Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we did hear this without the resolution or the MOA at Quality of Life. I now have those documents in front of me and have had time to look at them. I do support this project, but I do want to clarify some things. So this is a partnership between the Santa Fe Community College, the Santa Fe Community Foundation, and the City of Santa Fe. And I think we talked at Quality of Life about what is the city being asked to do, and I think there's this fear that we're going to be asked to budget for these stipends, and we've heard that they will come from this grant initially, and then some additional fundraising will allow the pilot project to last 2 years and potentially move from $400 to $500 a month. Do I have that right so far?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, yes.
Okay. And so what else is the city? So I'm looking at the MOU and what the city's being asked to contribute. I mean, it seems like the reason the city is involved is that this is a mayor's initiative, right, nationally. And so we got looped in because our mayor joined this group, and that's why the city of Santa Fe is involved. We're not being asked to administer the money. We're not being asked to give money. We are being asked to, according to the MOU, cities must make a full faith effort to leverage additional dollars, which I assume that's the language that says we will help in the fundraising, correct? But really, there's, I guess, some staff time maybe that you all are putting, the MOU talks about conduct biweekly check-ins and participate in the research consortium and help narrative shift. Participate in MGI narrative shift efforts. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but maybe you all can elaborate. But it's the staff you all will be participating in meetings, right?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, correct.
So, I mean, and beyond that, what is the city's role here?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, I think the city's, well, first of all, the city had a role in, the mayor had a role in bringing in the funding to the city.
Right.
You point out. I think the city's role is to really support the efforts, to champion the efforts. In theory, to be the council's role would be to be interested in the findings of the study and potentially to advocate for guaranteed income at a different level of our governments. And I think in terms of changing the narrative, if I could take a stab at that, it is essentially a project which philosophically has an underpinning that people are not in a low income bracket because of any character flaw that those folks have. They're in a lower income bracket because they don't have money.
So that's what it means. Yeah. So that's what it means when you talk about narrative shift efforts. It's
right.
Not very well written.
And for our office, for community services, we're very interested in this because we've already done a lot of work. It's not sort of outside of our portfolio of what we're doing as we look at how to build safety net services for the community and what role, programs have in essentially anti-poverty efforts. So our staff time on it is, I would say, not necessarily extra, although every meeting is extra. It's sort of in alignment with what we're already trying to achieve within the community services department. Not to minimize the incredible work Julie and the rest of the staff have done on launching it, but I think in terms of it being ongoing, that's the way I see it, and I hope that's helpful.
And that's really the crux of our involvement here is the staff participation and sharing the expertise that you gain from the work that you do into this project.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, yes, as well as potentially advocating for policy shift state at the state or federal level.
Okay. And the MOU also says the city of Santa Fe will develop a work plan for demonstration, design, and implementation and share with MGI for feedback. So will we see that work plan? And is that something we approve, or are we sort of blanket approving it? Because it says the parties agree that any terms or conditions included in the work plan will be incorporated into this MOA.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, essentially we have already done that in our proposal.
Okay.
And so the work plan is sort of already established as part of the proposal, and I would be happy to share it. It's been kind of a work in progress as we've tweaked back and forth between MGI and the community college, but you know, essentially it's not a new product.
Okay, I think that would be helpful for us to see, just because again, I think one of the questions we've been getting is, what is the city's role? Why are we involved? What is going to be required of us by passing this resolution and approving this MOA? So again, we're not being asked for money, and we're not going to be administering this grant. The money's not coming to us directly. And so I think it would be, and there's this, there's a fellow, as we've talked about, and we learned about it, quality of life, and you mentioned tonight, who will be doing, who will be supporting the project. And so again, just trying to help give some edges to what our role is for the city. I want to go, I'm a little concerned, I have to say, about the resolution, and I'm on page 7, if you all have it around, and we're in the be it further resolved. So this is this project started in California, and now it's being taken, it was successful there, and now it's being taken to cities across the country to further validate what they saw in California as a winning idea. Am I getting that right?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero, that's correct.
Okay, and so it's still a pilot project, right? We're still gathering data, trying to make sure that it's that this is a winning idea and a winning concept, and that it's correct.
Correct.
Okay. But at the same time, we're also using the growth of the pilot project across the country to start advocating at the same time for a federal program.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, that's correct.
Is in your experience, is that how these things are done?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, I don't know. I mean, I think the Stockton project has shown really promising results. I think the idea behind the cities, I think over 40 cities have joined the Mayors for Guaranteed Income, and I'm not sure how many of those are getting grants. I think 13 of them may be getting grants. And so the idea is, yes, we're continuing to study it. We're the more, you know, the bigger sample size you have, the stronger your results. But the assumption is that cities who joined believe in it on principle, and so should be prepared to advocate at this point. And any further information gathered from the study will likely support or add nuance to how we design policy at a federal level or a state level. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and I guess I mean we won't be able to advocate too much until we have our own experience from which we can speak from, correct?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth.
I mean,
we will be able to speak. We will be able to speak about our population and how they benefited. That said, if we didn't have this opportunity and we wanted to join the guaranteed income movement nationally, we could present and decide from this point forward that this is a policy that we support or the governing body supports. So I would say yes and no.
Right. I mean, we could say conceptually, we support this idea based on the research that's happened elsewhere, and we want to see this be a federal thing, and we think our population would benefit from something like this. But I think what we're getting here is the opportunity to maybe deepen that advocacy, because we will be able to point to our own community, to our own people, and their experiences and stories in building the narrative and shifting the narrative as it goes forward nationally, right?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, yes.
Okay. So the part where I have trouble, on page 7, lines 14 and 15, it says, the city lobbyist will promote a federally guaranteed income. I'm a little worried about that language being in there, because I don't think that we direct our city lobbyists through resolutions. Well, we have one big resolution, right, where we talk about what our priorities are for the next legislative session. And of course, our city lobbyist also has a contract, and we approve that contract. And I think I would have to go back and look at the contract, but I think the contract is for lobbying the state legislature. So I'm not quite sure what's contemplated here, and whether this is the appropriate place to be talking about what we want our city lobbyists to be doing at the state legislature, and whether this is in the scope of what we hire a city lobbyist for, because maybe we're saying we want that city lobbyist to go to Washington, in which case we'd be changing the scope of that contract, and probably, he'd be wanting more money to be doing that, and maybe he's not the right guy to be doing that. So I guess I worry a little bit about that, be it further resolved, and I just want to flag it as potentially something we want to take out here. I don't think we need this to be in spirit with the MOA. If this, and I think it needs more thought, and we maybe need to put it other places depending on what's contemplated here. All right, I'm just looking through my notes here. So the other interesting thing that jumped out at me is that this MOA is supposed to be in effect going backwards, February 1st through December 31st. That's interesting. Why is that?
So I can speak to that, Chair Beta, Councilor Romero Worth. So when we had first been approached about this funding, we actually received notification pretty early on in the year that the city was granted funding. It took a very long time to get our research design in place in order for MGI to feel comfortable releasing funding. We originally had a very small cohort that we were going to be working with. They requested we expand it to make it more evidence-based and to make the population size much more validated in terms of measuring data and outcomes. And so it took quite a while for us to get our research design approved by MGI. And so we're now at the point where they've approved our research design. So now we're able to bring forth the MOA. And the original language was from the MOA that was created back when we first received notification.
Okay, so it's not because nationally all these things started on February 1st.
No, I don't believe so.
Other grants and other okay.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, no, it really, that's when our work with them began. So it's
Okay.
retroactive in that sense for us locally.
Okay. All right, that's the only other thing I flagged. Those are all my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you guys for being here and putting up with me.
Other questions?
Move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a
Second.
second? And a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Beta.
Yes, and thank you for the questions and the discussion. That certainly cleared up a lot of issues or questions I had. Okay, our next item is item H, which is a request for approval of county partnership in the San Juan Chama Return Flow Project. Councilwoman Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Mr. Roach. Quick question for you. Can you define for me the lower Santa Fe River?
Yes.
What's the, I read it throughout in this, but I don't see a real, I don't know the true geographic of what the lower Santa Fe River is.
Chair Rivera, Councilwoman Lindell, that would be the Santa Fe River from the point at which the Paseo Real Water Reclamation Facility discharges into the Santa Fe River all the way down to, let's say, the Cochiti Dam.
Okay, I don't know if anybody else has questions on this. I'm trying to pull up my agenda on it because I wrote some questions into the document itself, which is kind of risky.
While you're looking, I would just offer to the committee that we sort of divide the Santa Fe River into three main sections. There's sort of the closed watershed portion of the watershed, which is the Santa Fe River all the way down to and including Nichols Reservoir. And then the kind of the urban stretch or the city stretch, which is Nichols Reservoir from the dam where we release water into the river there all the way down to the Paseo Real treatment plant. The upper section would be perennial, it would always flow. The middle section would be ephemeral, meaning depending on the time of the year and the living river releases we make, it may be dry, it may be wet in certain stretches or dry in others. For example, right now, if you go far enough up, it would be wet, but towards the bottom, it would be dry. And then again, once you get below the wastewater treatment plant, it would be perennial again because there's always a discharge occurring to the lower Santa Fe River there.
I appreciate that. My computer's not gonna let me pull my notes up, so I will yield the floor, Chair, and thank you for that answer.
Okay, Councilwoman Villarreal.
Just a clarification on, you said there was some changes since the county heard this item. Can you remind us what changes have occurred since that discussion? It was heard at Public Works, then it went to Santa Fe County, and there were discussions about changes. Is that correct? And then can you tell us what those were?
Sure, Vera, Councilwoman Lindell, Villarreal. Yes, thanks for the question. And I apologize. We were working with the county on this agreement. We had gotten to a place at a staff level where we thought we were ready to bring it forward. There was sort of an 11th hour change, and there was a verbal communication between myself and John Dupuy, the utility director for the county. We thought we were on the same page. They added some language that sort of tied the lower Santa Fe River planning process that this agreement envisions or creates to our Environmental Protection Act NEPA permitting process. And that was not my understanding of the communication. And so we did not add that language. And so as a result, the item that we took through Public Works was slightly different. And it was only, and I'll refer you to the agreement, section 6 of the agreement is just 2 subparagraphs, and it's the lower Santa Fe River planning process county termination option. And that's the only place where any substantive changes occurred. I say substantive because we found a couple other little errors that we did clean up. But the only place where there was a disagreement between what we had in Public Works and what the county approved was in the section A or the subparagraph A of section 6. And so I'd be happy to go further into detail on that if you would like. But essentially, we consulted with our NEPA, our National Environmental Protection Act experts on that permitting process, and added some language very specifically saying that this is not part of NEPA. We wanted to make sure that they were separate processes.
Can you tell us why? You didn't tell us before, but why is there a difference then? The NEPA project process is separate, entirely separate.
Yes, briefly. So there are a couple different the large permits that we need to go through for our return flow project include a state engineer permit, which essentially looks at water rights, and a NEPA permit, which essentially looks at environmental impacts. We believe there are some other values to be considered along the lower Santa Fe River that may not be captured by either of those, but we don't want to wrap them all up together and wait on the lower Santa Fe River dialogue until the NEPA process is complete. So ideally, what actually we would like to have had happen is that we understand our obligations, if any, from an environmental perspective, from a water rights perspective, and then we take that information to the lower Santa Fe River planning process.
Is that just to have additional data to share when you get to that process?
It's more to understand. So if you imagine a scenario where we go through the NEPA process and there is a finding that there's no significant impact from an environmental perspective. Let's imagine that. That would be one extreme. Another extreme would be we need to offset some amount of environmental impact. Once we understand those parameters, then there's more information for us to go to a lower Santa Fe River planning process with.
Thank you, Director Roach. That was the only clarification I really wanted to have at this point. Thank you.
Other questions from the committee?
Move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, can I have a roll call, please?
Councillor Cassett,
Yes.
Councillor Villarreal,
Yes.
Councillor Lindell,
Yes.
Councillor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Councillor Beta.
Yes. Okay, so that item is approved. We're on to item I, which is a request for approval of sole source procurement for project management, application support, and technical support for 4 years with Mountain River Consulting Inc. in the amount of $1,422,000. Councilwoman Lindell.
Thank you. Hi, Nancy. I'm sure you're thrilled that we have this up tonight. Okay, let's take a look at the document. Is this this says 4 year. Is it 4 year?
It is a 4-year contract. It is a 4-year contract. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm confused on page 1. It's a 4-year contract, but in the background and summary paragraph, it says it's needed to continue to assist the city in the 14-month implementation. So I'm confused as to why it's 4 years, but it's saying there that it's a 14-month implementation.
Councilman Abita, Councilor Lindell, it is a 4-year contract that we're requesting. Basically, the first year or the front end of the contract will be 14 months to get us through the upgraded billing system. Then we do anticipate in year 2, following year 3 and year 4, if needed, a much lower rate in what we pay them and what use we have for Mountain River. The big push is to obviously get the billing system up to date, upgraded, and that is a 14-month process. We will be crossing over fiscal years, so we do anticipate using Mountain River a little bit more in year 2. So the first year will be about 822,000. The second year we're anticipating to drop way down to about 300,000. Year 3 and year 4, of course, things could change. We may not need them at all, but we do, and we did, or I am requesting a 4-year contract just to make sure that we are up and going, the billing system is working, the fiscal years are closed out with any reporting that we might need. And we do too have currently ITT on board with training 2 individuals on the new billing system so that our use for Mountain River will significantly drop, hopefully all the way. But if something changes in year 3 or 4, we still have that opportunity to have Mountain River as a contracting consultant if need be.
Well, I kind of get that, but why didn't we just do a 2-year and put the pressure on ourselves not to need them? I mean, we're looking for what, almost $1.5 million on this contract, and we're looking at 822, and then you thought maybe around 3. We're giving ourselves a $300,000 to $400,000 cushion with them. I mean, I don't know. Do we need to go ahead and budget that money at this point in time for 3 to 4 years out? I mean, I'd like to not be paying them anymore.
I 100% agree with you, Counselor. And as Director Wheeler indicated earlier, the process for the city of Santa Fe, sole source or RFPs or anything like that is very time consuming and very strict. If we find that we do not need them in year 3 and in year 4, of course, there's the clause in the contract that we don't budget for. Just like if there's no, revenue or money, we don't continue with the contract. So I do believe that we're covered in several different areas where we can stop this contract if need be in the end or middle of year 2. And definitely year 3 and 4, if that's what happens, and we unfortunately set up for worst case scenario and hope that it gets better year after year after year.
In this contract, it's on page 16. It talks about project management, application support, and technical support. Is there one person that does the project management that we pay them $282,000 a year, one person that does application support that we pay over $250,000 a year, and another one for technical support? Do we really have these folks working 40 hours a week all year long?
They have a team of 4 individuals.
Your audio just went odd.
And we do use their expertise in which, I'm sorry, we do have, and their expertise is, just depending on what technique is needed. They have the individuals that will help with that. I will not say that there's one individual that we use 40 hours, the current UCIS system. If it's a billing issue, there is one individual that knows and understands the billing side of it a little bit more. If it's the project management, of course, for the 14 months that we're doing an upgrade, again, there's 1 or 2 individuals that understand the advanced system as we've been trying to get advanced for about 7 years. So there are two individuals that know that system a little bit better for the assistance of for the 14-month implementation. It really does depend on what type of issues or errors we have in our UCIS system as to which expertise we need from Mountain River, from their 4 individuals and their team.
I'm always so frustrated with this contract because I think that we have great people. And it's just hard for me to believe that in all the time that we've been paying them, that we don't have someone that has learned this system that can do exactly for us what these consultants have done for, how long have we used them as consultants? How many years?
I believe with this contract, it would be 9 years. So we've used them for 5 years right now, and with this contract, it would increase to 9.
It's just hard for me to vote to spend $822,000 on 120 hours of consulting a week for a year, every week of the year. I can never make sense of this contract that we have with them. And the time period for the scope of this work is just from July 1st to June 30th of next year. I don't know. I just think we have people that are smart and capable, and it just seems like they could have taught us how to use this system. And I don't know if it's that they don't want to teach us how to use this system, or we don't have anybody that wants to learn how to use it, which I doubt that, because I think we have great people on staff that could do this. So I'm pretty frustrated with it. I'm sure you are too, because you're sick of me always going on about this contract. But it seems like a lot of money year after year after year for someone to be consulting with us. That why don't they train us instead of consulting with us? I mean, we have smart people. They can learn how to do this. Do they not want to train us? Do they not want us to know how to do this?
I don't believe it's that. Honestly, I do believe that it is the UCIS system. It is, it's a 21-year-old system. It is really based in F keys and DOS, and it has not been kept up with the times where everything is dropped down and you choose a button instead of having to, free type and things like that. I really do believe that they, give us as all of the information that we possibly can. A lot of us, I've been forced to start learning IT a lot more than I probably would like to, just so that we can keep the system up and running, the current system up and running. And I think that's unfortunately the problem that we have right now is the new technology is not something that individuals really want to learn. They don't want to learn old technology. They want to learn all of the new stuff that's coming out. And so unfortunately it is expensive, but it is more worth our time to hire a consultant than it is to train on old stuff that will be obsolete in 14 months.
So are we rolling over to our new system very, very soon?
So we did start the new system upgrade in May. It is moving quite along with the schedule that we have planned. We do plan on doing dual bills on or about March, April kind of timeframe, so that we have about 3 or 4 months of actual concurrent billing systems running together, so that we can make sure that our billing system currently matches the new billing system. You know, there's not going to be any discrepancies in the bills. That will be about 3 to 4 months of testing. And I really do hope that we can go live, you know, July 1st, August 1st of 2022 with the new billing system with no hiccups.
I think I've beat this thing long enough. I'll yield the floor, Chair.
Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Jimenez, for joining us once again. I share the same concerns about this as my colleague. Just seems like this will go away. But I guess the one thing that I'm confused about, the last conversation we had, I think it was during budget hearings, was saying that the time frame we asked you about, that this could be complete where we could start transitioning and start weaning ourselves off of a contractual agreement. You said 18 months. So can you tell us what changed from that time frame? Because now you're saying at least 2 and then potentially 3 years, possibly 4, depending on how it goes. So what changed from that last conversation to now with this contract?
Councilor Abeta, Councilor Villarreal, the time frame hasn't changed. The upgrade to the billing system is still 14 months. We started it in May. Mountain River does other consulting for public utilities. It's not just our billing system. They help with the rates, the calculation of ESD and water and wastewater rates. You know, so again, we've got to use old information from the UCIS system. We have to then get reports from the new system, which we should be able to get all of the reports out of the new system because, of course, we will be trained on the new system. So we set up a 4-year contract in hoping that we don't need them for year 3 and year 4. But again, you have to project worst case scenario. I would rather have them in place, ready to go if something were to be needed, and then cancel year 3 or year 2.5 or, you know, year 4, rather than and not have a contract and then unfortunately have to go through the whole process all over again. And that's time constrained, time issues, you know, which then delays even more the use of not needing them anymore or having a time lapse between you know, what the issue is with the old system versus the new system. So it really is a projection of worst case scenario in the hopes that we can terminate or reduce it significantly down by year 2, 2.5.
Yes, I mean, I hear you about the contingency. It's just hard because I feel like we've had a contingency for many years and it just keeps getting drawn out. And I know that there's different factors that play into that. It's just hard to keep seeing this contract come to us. And then the other thing that I'm confused about, I know it's a small amount, but the contract indicates that the pay, there's an amount stipends for travel that is approximately about 12,000. And I know in the grand scheme of the amount, that's not a lot, but I'm still confused. I thought this company was Santa Fe based and I saw the address, it has an Idaho address. So are those travel expenses being covered from the contractor traveling back and forth from Idaho?
So it is based out of Idaho, the main corporation. We do have one of their team members does live here in Santa Fe, who is the majority of the time who we, can consult with. For the implementation of the upgraded system, there is potentially a time where one or two of the individuals from Idaho may need to travel down here to Santa Fe for implementation or when we go live, so that we can have all hands on deck and actually be in the same room, rather than trying to, converse either over Zoom or over text messages or emails or anything like that. And that was reduced down quite a bit. I believe it started out at 36,000, and I did cut that basically down to the 12,000. First of all, because of COVID, we don't know what's going on there. And second of all, we should be able to, do most things nowadays through emails, Zoom meetings, or anything like that. So I did reduce that down to about 12,000. But again, when we go live, it's sometimes easier to have everybody in the same room so that we can really see what goes haywire if something does. I'm really hoping that everything will be set long before anything, goes haywire.
Well, that's good to know that it's gone down from 36,000. So, yeah, I don't know. We know the need, we know the challenges of the UCIS system. And then there's also an IT team we have that I feel like is our own team, and people like Councilor Lindell said, know these, that have the ability to learn it. So I'm just hoping that happens sooner than later. So I'll yield the floor for now. Thank you.
Okay, Councilwoman Cassette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I had very similar questions and sentiments as my colleagues. Nancy, I'm sure that this is just exhausting for you. So thank you again for being with us. Ms. Dunaway, you had popped on and now you're gone, but I actually had a question as you had jumped on as there was discussion about procurement, and I was hoping to hear whatever it was that you wanted to say, which caused you to turn on your video. So please let me know what it was that you wanted to talk about to us.
Chairman Abeyta and Councilor Cassette, thank you. Councilwoman Cassette, thank you. Yes, I popped on when it was discussed about process. Yes, we have created an internal process, and I keep, as I attend this meeting, because I am an attendee for the meeting in case there's any procurement questions or why we procured the way we did. So I wanted to address that, because the sole source procurement that was done immediately and was done in response to their request. And I keep hearing about the process being slow, the process being slow. Well, the process isn't slow. The process is following the procurement code, and we're following the law. So I just wanted to ensure that everyone understands that. And it has been quite the process for us in the procurement area to be able to instruct and, train, and, we're new. It's something new to the city. And I know it's a frustration for everybody, but it's also, what we're here for is to ensure that we're following the procurement code and being fiscally responsible. So I just wanted to jump in and say that.
Thank you so much, Fran. And yes, I know that that you guys do a very, very thorough job of making sure that we are really sticking to that code and sticking to the laws, and we do really appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Of course. I guess where I struggle, and Nancy, I absolutely, we want to make sure that your team has what you need to make a successful transition. And I'm just curious if we want to build in a check into this contract and what that could potentially look like, as it is something that many of us are concerned about and want to make sure that we are staying up to date. And maybe at that 2-year mark, we bring this thing back to really talk about where we are and, if we can officially pull the plug on it and not be paying any bit more dollars out. And if not, why not? And what is it that we need to address? And I'd be curious to hear my colleagues' thoughts on that. Because that's where I'm leaning. I want to Councilor Lindell's point, it's nice to try to hold ourselves to that deadline. But again, Nancy, we just want to make sure, of course, that you have what you need to make this a very successful transition, so that we can stop utilizing this contract and we really can move to the new system and pull this in internally. So I would be curious to hear my colleagues' thoughts on building in a check into this contract in about 2 years.
Yeah, it sounds like we can make it part of our motion if we want to approve it, and then just with that condition.
Any unintended consequences that my more experienced colleagues might know about that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head? If not, I will go ahead and make a motion. Well, if we're ready, I'll make a motion to approve the contract, building in a check-in point at the 2-year mark of the contract, whatever that date would be. Nancy, can you fill that in for me?
Absolutely. We'll probably bring it forward with the budget preparation for fiscal year July. What are we? 22. So 23. So February of 23, when we prepare the budget, 23 would be technically the 3rd year. So it would be finishing up the 2nd, going into the 3rd, if that's okay.
Okay, so when we're doing budget hearings in, basically when you're preparing the budget of February 2023. So when we're doing the budget hearings for FY24.
Correct, yes. And I'd like that only because I don't really want to bring it in July and maybe you not give us a contract and then we're sort of stuck with maybe not having any IT support if we still need it.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Can I just ask one question about the motion?
Yes, Councilwoman Merrill-Worth.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. So we are approving this contract for 4 years, though. We're just saying we want you to come back in 2 and let us know how things are going.
Correct. And if there is and at that time, if there is looking like there's going to be a need to continue utilizing the contract for the next 2 years, we can have a deeper discussion about what's going on there, so we have a better understanding and address it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, can I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Councilor Cassett?
Yes.
Councilor Villarreal?
Yes.
Councilor Lindell?
Yes.
Councilor Romero-Worth?
Yes.
Councilor Beta?
Yes. Okay, that item passes. We are on to item L, which is a resolution donating property identified as 635 Alto Street and resources to a developer qualified as a grantee under the New Mexico Affordable Housing Act for development of at least 5 low-price dwelling units. Councilwoman Lindell.
Thank you. I'll try to make this quick. I remember when we had the competition and there were designs presented for that particular property. And I'm just wondering, how will we choose a developer, and would the winning design that was done all these years ago, is that a design that is in consideration to ask a developer to implement?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Lindell, thank you for that question. The design, because it was stamped by the prior architect who submitted the design to the competition, but then also was hired by the city to take that design through the historic board for review and approval, which it was approved by the H board in 2010, I believe. With some modifications, the H board wanted a slightly different design style. Instead of territorial, they wanted more of a Pueblo style. So the final design was vetted by the H board, but unless we have the exact same architect work on the project, we are not able to modify that architect's design. So the design will serve the winning design, the design that the H board approved, which of course that approval is no longer valid. Any project has to go back to the H board, but that design can be used as a proof of concept, and certain elements from that design can be replicated for a future design. So the design will be provided to the respondents to this RFQ here are some good ideas. Here's how this can work, and to encourage them to replicate those elements in their proposed design. And as to the second part of your question, the focus, like most RFQs that we do, we will be looking at both the qualifications of the bidder and whether they have the experience to do this kind of project, but then also what kind of financial feasibility are they proposing? Are they realistic? Do they know how to build something like this? And then are they able to build it in an economical way so that they can then sell it at the low price dwelling unit prices? We're looking for creativity. We're looking for affordability controls. We're looking for proven capability.
I think that's great. That's all I have, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Beta.
Yes. Okay, so that item passes. We are on to item Z, which is a request for approval of a budget adjustment resolution in the total amount of $1 million from the 2018 bond premiums to be used for the Santa Fe Train Depot exterior rehabilitation project. Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to get clarification about bond premiums. If staff could tell us a little bit more about how bond premiums are generated, and from which bond specifically are we taking $2 million?
Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, thank you for that question. Brad, I'm not sure if you're listening. You're probably the best one to answer that. But I believe this is from the 2018 GRT bond. And a premium is where there's a savings between the amount of interest that we actually have to pay compared to what we thought we were going to have to pay or something like that. Sorry, it's a little fuzzy, but we've had an opportunity actually, and finance has been really diligent with us identifying these opportunities where there are savings and we can allocate additional funding, and that's how we got this $1 million.
Thank you. I'm wondering if someone from finance can also elaborate on that, since that is your wheelhouse.
Brad. So text Brad.
Brad, are you on? Or are you watching TV? Or are you making dinner? Or is there someone else? Is Alexis? Can she answer that?
I'm texting Brad and Alexis.
Okay.
Oh, great.
And while we're waiting, I guess Regina, you know, we talked about this a long time ago, and there was a conversation, this was pre-pandemic, that tourism might be able to support this.
Hey, we need you on the committee meeting.
Oh, all right.
Sorry about that. I got him, he's joining.
So I guess I'm just curious what happened with there was an idea that tourism would be able to help with the rehab of the facility of the building. And then that just kind of fell through the wayside, but I'm trying to remember what happened.
Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, from what I know about that is that, this is actually a $1.7 million construction project. So it's pretty massive. This $1 million is just going to take care of the exterior so we can keep it from falling down. It's actually being held up by jacks right now, and it's dangerous. And then lodgers tax took a real hit during the pandemic. And so I think their contribution would be small. They are a user of the facility. And so, as a lessee, say, maybe that's a contribution towards the operations and maintenance. But as far as the capital, I think that it just didn't seem like a really feasible funding source.
Okay. And there was an amount that we did allocate. I feel like it was a year ago. I don't even remember now at this point. Everything's a blur, but there was an amount, didn't we? We did for the preliminary design, I think, or just a study about what was needed. Was there anything done on the building structurally with that funding?
No, actually, but we are in 100% design. So we're actually ready to move to construction instantly. So you have, I think it's probably in the realm of like $325,000. We got a $25,000 grant, and then we've allocated funding over the years to the design. And Sam has managed this really productively so that we have full design now for the historically appropriate remodel. And he's also gotten people on board to undertake just the exterior. So yes, there has been funding approved in the past.
Got it. Thank you. And Brad, the question that I had was about bond premiums and how they're generated. And Director Wheeler said that it did come from the 2018 GRT bond, but I just want to understand what premium is. She described it as savings, but I wanted to understand that better.
Mr. Chair, Counselor, the bond premium, we issue city bonds and the coupon payment is 5%. While the market rate of interest is 1.5%. And so the bond premium represents what a investor will invest above 100 par. So they'll pay us $120 for a bond that will mature worth $100, but they're going to get 5% interest over the next 20 years instead of 1.5% interest over the next 20 years. And so that bond premium comes in, we issue a $20 million bond, as in the case of the 2018 GRT bond. The city received, net of fees, advisors, other stuff, brokerage, bank, 22,600,000 and some odd thousand. 2.6 million of that represents bond premium.
Okay, and then we can use that for what
Anything that you would use the bond proceeds for.
Say that again.
Anything you would use the bond proceeds for.
Okay. Anything that's related to the 2018 GRT bond, we can fold that back in if we need to. Okay.
If I could, Chairman and Councilor Villarreal, and this actually is a targeted investment, not just because of the urgency of taking care of the depot, but also because of the ability to deploy this money quickly, since it is at 100% design, and also because of the length of the life of the investment. So it really helps the bond overall, as you sort of had this average life of all the investments. And if you remember, we reallocated $6 million of the bond to more like operating capital investments this year, which were like equipment. So this is on that other end of the spectrum. It's a really long-lived investment and it helps the bond that way.
Got it. Okay.
Mr. Chair, yeah, losing the fire station, a 40, 50-year asset, really was the anchor to the 18 GRT bond. $1 million going out to the basic restructuring of the depot is again a 40, 50-year type asset. And it really does extend the life of the overall bond issue.
Okay, thank you. And then one more question about, you said the overall cost of the project, which I think it's gone up each year, just by the nature of it, but you said 1.7 million for the entire project, and we'll have this million. So the remaining amount, where do we foresee finding the additional funding?
Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, of course, that would be a consideration for the GRT bond, for any future GO bond. I think those are probably the two big candidates.
Okay, so that's pretty much it. I mean, I guess
we could ask the
laughing.
legislature. We
All
could
right.
ask the legislature for money too. Yeah, and then that, if we got it in next session, we wouldn't have it till the following September, but that timing wouldn't be so bad. So we could consider it for a priority there as well.
Yeah, this is a priority. It's unfortunate it's gone to the point where we're gonna have to do a lot more work, so. All right, well, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, other questions?
Move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? I'll second. Any discussion? Can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell, Counselor Lindell,
Go ahead and just continue with the roll call.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
and Counselor Beta.
Yes. Okay, so this item passes. The next item is matters from staff. Are there any matters from staff?
Not at this time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, matters from the committee. I don't have any matters. Our next meeting is Tuesday, July 6th, 2021. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.